So we've done everything so far relative to the average Major League Baseball player. Batting runs was relative to the average batter in the major leagues. Base running was relative to the average base runner. And even though we had a different adjustment with fielding, it was against the average fielder at every position. So far we've been looking at average, but Bill James made the argument, and we presented the case in our replacement level stats track here in Sabermetrics 101, that you should be thinking about replacement level over average. Quick tutorial: if the world is a normal distribution in something we're measuring, when we get to Major League Baseball players, we're way out on one tail here. This talent required to play Major League Baseball puts you very far away from the average human walking on the earth. Blowing this up a little bit, you can see the tail of the right-hand curve is what we're selecting from. And the concept is there's freely available talent here at the replacement level. This is the replacement level. And by freely available, you have to pay these players a salary, but that's a sunk cost because there's a minimum salary. So you can get a minimum salaried player here at the replacement level. And we looked at some data in the replacement level stats track, and we showed that data sometimes looks like this in different metrics we're looking at. And then this cloud here, depending on how we define it, is replacement level. And average is here. Okay, the average player is a little bit different than the mode, the peak player. It's a little bit of a right skew, so that's average. That's just a refresher around the concept, why we're looking at replacement level, and how we have to go from average. We have to go from average now to the replacement level. Ultimately, we want to know about runs above replacement, not runs above average. One way to think about this concept of average versus replacement: when we talk about a replacement level team, if they played in the major leagues, they expect to get about 48 wins. But when we talk about the average team, we expect that average team to get 81 wins. And hopefully you can appreciate the real difference here between these two kinds of teams, the replacement level team versus the average team, and how different a team they really are. So average, this is always important, average is valuable. Average players have real value because they get to average winning teams. So keep this in mind as we go through this final adjustment to what we've been doing. Remember, we've calculated everything from average, so we've been measuring average so far in base running, fielding, and hitting, batting. So now we're going to move on to the final adjustment, which is to go from average, which we've been measuring, to the replacement level. How do we do that? In other words, how do we convert from runs above average to runs above replacement? So we have to add a difference. We have to add a number to the average to get to the replacement level. Okay, and we'll walk through again the Adrian Beltre example. But fundamentally, what analysts have worked out is that it's about 20 runs for every 600 plate appearances. That's the basic difference between replacement level and average. In other words, the average player over 600 plate appearances is going to be worth about 20 runs more than the replacement player. And what that means, when you have 20 runs, and we've talked about how we convert runs to wins, that's about a 2 WAR player. 2 wins above replacement. If you generate 20 runs for your team, you're about a 2 wins above replacement player. That's the average player is about a 2 WAR player, and of course the replacement level player is a 0 WAR player. Now some players earn negative WAR, and they actually have below replacement level value. Conceivably, there's a player in AAA who can replace that player who's generating negative WAR. There should be many players at AAA and AA who can generate 0 WAR. So if you're generating negative WAR in the major leagues, you're probably going to find it hard to stay in Major League Baseball because you get replaced by somebody in the minor leagues. So let's go on to Adrian Beltre. We had 79 runs above average, and then we added the 20.4 replacement runs, and we ended up with 99.4 runs above average. Then there was the conversion from runs to wins, giving Beltre 9.7 WAR. And that was one of the best years in the recent times in baseball. It's a very high number. This was a fantastic year by Adrian Beltre, a 9.7 WAR year. But how do we use WAR in sabermetrics? How do we use WAR in baseball analytics? Well, they help in generating team win projections. If you're a Major League Baseball team, you want to project out how many wins you think your team will get. And you'll do that by looking at all the different players you might acquire or have on your team already and project out what they might do in the next year. You're going to project how much value they'll have for your team. The other use of WAR is now we can compare players of different eras. Willie McCovey had 67 career wins above replacement, but so did Andrew Jones. Just by looking at this framework metric measuring all different components to get at the value of a player, it's a pretty good argument that Willie McCovey was just as valuable as Andrew Jones and vice versa. They're about the same level WAR, meaning the same contribution to winning. They did it different ways. Willie McCovey was a power hitter, first baseman, and Andrew Jones was a center fielder, and added real value because of his defense and his ability to play center field. Willie McCovey was a first baseman, so he got dinged on some of the positional adjustments we do with WAR, but he was a power hitter and generated lots of value through his bat. Another way to think about comparing players of different eras, George Brett had a peak year of 9.1 WAR, and Beltre had a 9.7 WAR season. So both third basemen and comparable in their peak years, Beltre to George Brett. We can also think about how to pay a player. What's the monetary value of a player? When you add up the whole league and you look at the salaries to the WAR that players generate, you get around $8 million for every WAR when you talk about free agency. When you hit free agency, you're looking at contracts that are about $8 million for every WAR projected for that player. Now, if Beltre was a 9.7 WAR player in 2015, he would be worth a lot. Do the math, 8 times 9.7, and you get a big number of his value. So WAR is useful for projecting performance and getting real value of a whole team and how you put it together. It's also valuable for comparing players of different eras who played different times. And you also can start thinking about salaries, especially of free agents in the open market, and how much money is paid, how much salary is given to players based on their projected WAR, their projected future wins above replacement.